Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. Y'all remember when Wizards of the Coast managed to piss off their entire community by trying to sabotage the enjoyment of their own game for the sake of money via legal shenanigans? I remember it quite vividly, because for 1 week, the entire D&D community learned what it was like to be a fan of Warhammer 40k. Yes, GW has a long and storied history of being one of the most greedy companies in the entirety of nerd culture. What? Tons of Tyrannid units got nerfed despite being one of the most balanced armies in the game? Oh, I'm sure it's all just a coincidence that all the new models up for pre-order were completely untouched, and now are head and shoulders better than anything you could have in your existing collection. Using game balance to drive sales? Nah, that would be crazy. Shut up and buy your overpriced plastic, nerd. For those not in the know, 40k is a franchise run by a sketchy company orbited by a handful of societal rejects with rules so complicated that even the most dedicated of players have no idea what the f is going on half the time, and lore more dense than the first draft of the Bible. That being said, Warhammer 40k is an amazing property, but it's got a lot going against it when it comes to attracting new fans. So if you want to try and grow the hobby to attract new people, the last thing you want to do is also make it boring. The story I have for you today stars a player who is excited to play in a Warhammer RPG, only for his hopes to be subject to exterminatus when a talentless DM and OP's loathsome teammates steal the show. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG-Horrorstories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from Reddit user Colonel Jebediah and is titled The Longest Combat Turn Ever, or How to Kill a Player's Interest in a New Game. Hello, first time post here. I've read all the other stories, so I'm inspired to tell my own. Copy and pasting this story from another board. No, it's not as dramatic as table flipping players or as interesting as DMs inserting their particular romantic tastes onto the group, but it's nonetheless a cautionary tale for players and DMs. Setting. This game was conducted years ago, around 2014 on Roll20. I was just a college kid and didn't really know anyone IRL that was interested in a more serious game. I'm all for tomfoolery and murder hobo shenanigans, but my friend group made purely meme characters, such as a cyborg Rocky Balboa and a runaway slave barbarian from the Pizza Pits. I was on the hunt for something related to Warhammer 40k, as I have tried Dark Heresy and I enjoyed DMing that, but I wanted to play. Eventually, after many applications, I did find a group for Only War, a more military grunt style of playing where you're one of millions in the Imperial Guard army in space, for those unfamiliar. Introductions were made, character sheets made and approved, and I was eagerly looking forward to it. There were 5 people total in this group, and we spoke over voice chat. DM, a player who I'll refer to as Commando as he played the weapon specialist, and 2 players who were both operators, pilots or drivers for the many vehicles in the game. As they worked in tandem within the same vehicle, I'll call them Operator Gunner and Operator Driver. Finally, there was myself. Hearing that the others were a weapon specialist and the other 2 were vehicle operators, I wanted to be the tech priest, because 40,000 years in the future you need a priest to say a prayer to the spirits in the light switch to activate the blessed bulb. I was hyped to play. Heads up, there were no arguments, and my expectations were not high, mind you. I know that it's a gamble what you'll get with a random group online, but I couldn't help but be excited to play. And all the players seemed mature and knew their stuff. Finally, let's get into the story. The DM introduces Commando and myself to the local NPC officer in a camp on a far-off jungle world filled with old ruins from human settlers thousands of years before. The camp is bustling with activity as the Imperial Guard rush about preparing to deal with the planetary threat. Orcs. For the unaware, orcs are big, bulky green gorillas that talk in Cockney accents and chop you with their big choppers and outnumber you 100 to 1. The officer calls for the operators to join us in his tent, wherein he states we'll be assigned to work with them as a squad and head the attack on a nearby orc stronghold. Turns out that while the commando and myself are just joining, the DM and the operators have been playing these sessions up to 6 times now, which may explain the next few things. We're told that the attack will be in a week, and the DM states that if we'd like to roleplay or do anything in that week, then we may. Roleplay! Awesome! That's my jam! Though, being new, I waited for my party to say something first. Insert one actual, literal, solid minute of awkward silence from everyone. I eventually stated that I'd like to take a look at the operator's vehicle to see if I can tune it up, and also to know what I could be working with. Clarification, operators in this universe know how to drive the machines, but not how to actually repair it or how it runs in detail. That's my job as a tech priest. Operator Driver is still awkwardly silent, but he's not AFK, as we can still hear him doing things at his desk over the mic. Operator Gunner eventually gives me the go-ahead, and the DM pulls up the document about the vehicle for me to look at. Red flags inbound. And to make it clear, I'm not a lore freak. If it makes the game fun, I'm up for a little lore bending, but I'd also like to be told ahead of time if something particularly is lore breaking. I read the document. Vehicle, Warwalker. I hesitated a moment. I haven't heard of that vehicle before out of character, so I asked the party what a Warwalker was. Was it like the common Sentinels? Humanity's own two-legged tanks. The DM replied, no, it was a completely new machine. This was a major issue already, as in the setting, new machines are an anathema. Tech priests are heavily not for inventing new machines and just keeping the current ones repaired. And it's actually heresy, the kind you can get executed for, to go about making new machines, especially without permission. The only thing worse than inventing new machines would be using alien machines. But like I said, lore bending for fun? That's alright. So I just keep quiet about it and try to get more details since this is an entirely new vehicle to me. I ask for what weapons it has, if it has had any issues before, if there's anything they'd like me to tune up, and for a visual of it. They send me a picture of a Warwalker. Turns out it wasn't an invented new machine, it is the other Warwalker in lore. An alien Warwalker. Extreme heresy. Internally, I'm thinking, oh, okay, they're just using a picture. It's not actually an Eldar space elf vehicle, right? To allay my fears, I half-jokingly speak up, stating, ooh, looks like an Eldar walker, haha, I could still work with that. To which the operator driver finally replied, yeah, we took the Warwalker from the Eldar and we jury-rigged it ourselves to work. And there goes the hope of the theme's setting having any impact. Still, I stay quiet, and I tune it up. The DM is lacking in telling me what I accomplish other than, you give it a +1 to accuracy against flying targets. The next hour of gameplay is awkward silence. I try sparking conversation, offering to talk to others or fiddle with their guns and add attachments or tune them up. They all pass. During this very awkward hour, it seems like some were watching YouTube, and 2 players were noisily eating chips or something crunchy in the background. So I got 2 different sides of me battling for what they want to talk about first, those being the Warhammer Enthusiast and the narcissistic D&D YouTuber. It's a lot like that 2 wolves meme, but it's a lot worse. Okay, one of them just won. Let's talk about Warhammer. To me, what makes Warhammer isn't the elves and orcs in space or the comically overpowered weapons. It's the fact that whether we're talking 40k or fantasy, everything sucks for everybody. No matter what faction or time period, the one constant theme of Warhammer is, to quote Robot Gorilla Man, yeah, I know his name is Robute, but that's stupid, is holding on to your rage against the dying of the light. There is no hope. There is no future, but everyone continues to fight regardless of the cruelty of the world that they've been cursed to inhabit. Whether that is a good or bad thing is entirely up to interpretation. So if you're choosing to play in a Warhammer setting, why would you just randomly decide to throw what makes Warhammer out the window? Seriously, the whole point of the Imperium of Man is that they're all so ass backwards that even trying to improve your situation by inventing something that could help people is a great way to catch a bullet. Without its overly edgy, grimdark vibes, Warhammer just becomes a weird collage of every fantasy and sci-fi property. So if you're chucking the grimdark out the window, why even run it in Warhammer anymore? Why not just do generic sci-fi or fantasy? At least when you do that, you're not setting up unrealistic expectations for people who are into Warhammer, or even worse, setting up new people to be very surprised when they decide to check out the rest of Warhammer. This shit isn't exactly Harry Potter. The only Slytherin that's going on here are the Gene Stealers, who are slithering on into humanity's gene pool in order to serve them up as an appetizer to a galaxy-spanning space god. And believe it or not, that's the best case scenario for everyone living in the galaxy. So on to the actual role-playing game element here. Dude, being a player in a game where both the DM and the players aren't super involved is a living hell that I wouldn't wish on my least favorite politician. And those who know me, you know that's really fucking bad. Get excited about what you're doing in the game. Even if you're faking your enthusiasm, that stuff is contagious. And just like enthusiasm, disinterest and boredom is pretty contagious too. The blame for a boring D&D game doesn't just fall on the DM. Don't get me wrong, a lot of it does, but not even close to all of it. It doesn't matter how good a story's setting and lore is. If its characters are garbage, the whole story is garbage. So keep that in mind next time you find yourself dozing off in a role-playing game. In a game of imagination, reality is literally what you choose to make it. Then the DM finally moves the scene along. It's been a week, and it's time to assault the Orc Fort. Now, to be fair, this next part was entertaining as we all got together, looked at a map of the area, and planned our assault. This was the kind of thing I wanted. Role-playing as a tactical unit, having to think out our attack, and then performing it. The operators would storm the front of the Orc Fort with their Warwalker, followed by 2 squads of guardsmen. I, as the tech priest, would stick close to them and keep an eye on their machine and give firing support with my gun arms sprouting from my back. Commando would take another squad down south, along up a hill, and start laying fire from his souped-up sniper rifle. The objective was simple: kill all the orcs. Easy peasy. Turns out it was too easy, but only for one part of our group. We begin the assault. The initiative goes to the commando. Operators, since they were both in the machine, they counted as one turn. Myself, guardsmen, and then the hundreds of orcs inside. The commando moves and gets 1/3 of the way to the hill, and ends his turn. The operators move and manages to not only reach the fort with extreme speed in a single turn, but still have the chance to unleash a salvo of missiles that went about destroying the orcs guarding the 2 towers by the gate, and the gate itself. The guardsman squads and myself are way in the back, and it would take us 3 whole turns to catch up. The DM proceeds to roll for each individual orc, and the operators roll for each individual damage. 23 orcs in total die. The whole process took 20 minutes. Finally, it's my turn. Already seeing that this will not go so great, I tell the guardsmen to hurry ahead while I try to go around the side of the fort and deal with any escaping greenskins. I make it 1/3 of the way. Guardsmen's turn. They move. Orcs' turn. Proceed with another 20 minutes of every single orc in the fort mobilizing and charging at the lone Warwalker. Not a single attack made against the machine actually damages it. Commando's turn. He keeps moving. He's now 2/3 of the way to the hill. Operator's turn. They are now in the middle of the fort. Their turn started, and I still remember this clearly, at 4:30 p.m. on my clock. The driver makes evasive moves and rams into structures or other orc vehicles like war trucks. The gunner uses 5 whole different weapons on the orcs: missile salvo, laser cannons, bolter cannons, plasma cannon, an auto stubber basic machine gun. I don't even know any walkers that can carry that much. Once again, dice rolls everywhere. The sound of so many virtual dice being rolled over and over again prompted me to lower my volume. Eventually, the DM describes that almost half of the orcs are dead or dying. I looked at the clock. 5:20 p.m. A single turn took almost an hour, and no one else has even participated. I remained quiet, as did Commando, and we took our turns. Commando finally reached the hill due to his crit on his acrobatic skills and managed to kill 2 orcs in a turret. I managed to get to the door. The guardsmen are still trying to catch up, and the orcs are still firing on the Warwalker. One does damage to get a lucky shot on it with a rocket launcher, but it hardly hurt the operators. It was once again the operators' turn. A repeat of their last turn occurred, this time lasting only 30 minutes, and the fighting was over. When it was my turn again, I opened the side gate to see everything on fire and green bodies everywhere. Internally sighing, I took it onto myself to RP again and call headquarters to let them know that the mission was a resounding success. The debrief was lackluster, as Commando and myself were pretty tired, and the operators didn't seem too into it because they returned to their silence like earlier, so the DM decided to call it a night. There were no future games with them, as it seemed like the DM just up and vanished from Roll20 and no one reached out. This really shot my interest in playing any only war games or even any games on Roll20 again for a while. Thankfully, a few months later, I gave Only War another shot and found an amazing game that lasted a few sessions. There you go. Not all bad games are dramatic. Some are just really drawn out and more power fantasy in the not-so-fun way. TLDR. Join games with players that are extremely unresponsive. Enter combat, where 2 of us spend the entire combat moving while the other pair takes an hour to kill everything. End of story. You know, for being the part of the role-playing game where it's determined whether characters live or die, combat really has the potential to be the most boring part of the entire hobby. You really gotta put a special emphasis on making sure that shit keeps moving throughout the entire combat session. To make combat interesting, the encounter needs to do 2 things. Play out in a rapid, brutal pace, and provide a challenge to what is supposed to be a group of hardened adventurers. This combat did none of that. Not only did it crawl along at the pace of a tortoise injecting ketamine, but it was also stupid easy. One of the laziest ways to add challenge to an encounter is to just throw a bunch of trash mobs at your players, because if it ends up being a challenge, it's gonna be really time-consuming. But if the players end up being stronger than anticipated, you end up with what I call the steamroller effect. All the players are driving this giant machine capable of huge amounts of destruction, but it's locked to only 5 miles an hour, and whoever's driving it probably is wishing they chose a different career path. And on that note, we have a fan art submission this week. That's right, how about we take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake? This week's fan art comes from viewer Lexfiles, who has submitted an art piece titled Drake's Battle of the Century, aka Why Larry is the Only Kobold. Here we see the Drake staring down Grimy the Neckbeard, hand cannon and switchblade at the ready.
Oh dear God, Drake, our defenses are overrun!
My cringe will overtake the earth, cringe hoarder. Now it is time for you to perish.
Alright, you son of a bitch. If you and your man boobs kill at least 5 more Larrys, then I might be motivated to do something about it.
Drake, you are such an asshole!
Thank you again, Lexfiles, for submitting your art. If you would like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.